This stupendous collection features every important category of classical music ever written. Best Loved Overtures, Best Loved Symphonies, Best Loved Concertos, and Best Loved Dances. Plus, you'll get Best Loved Ballets and Best Loved Piano Music.
The Collector's Library of Best Loved Classics is just $19.95. To order, call this toll-free number now.
This is CNN.
From Washington, the Capitol Gang.
Welcome to Capitol Gang. I'm Al Hunt with Mark Shields, Robert Novak, and Mona Charen. This week's guest, Democratic Congressman Charles Rangel of New York. It's good to have you back, Charlie.
Good to be back with the gang.
Terrific. The latest CNN USA Today poll shows Bill Clinton gaining ground and George Bush, leading 54% to 39%. But this week, the Democratic candidate was on the defensive again about his Vietnam military draft status. Clinton was asked to comment on a Los Angeles Times report alleging yet another successful effort to avoid induction.
I have two things to say about it. Number one, everybody involved in the story is not living. And number two, I said everything I had to say at the American Legion. I have nothing else to say about it. I have no comment.
Clinton also came under attack from black Democratic leaders for sidestepping their support. Bob, is the Clinton bandwagon hitting some potholes?
Well, it's hard to say so with a 15-point lead in the polls, but a lot of that polling was done prior to the time of the publicity about the draft problem. This is a problem, Al, that just won't go away. As much as Clinton's people say, oh, people don't care about it, it sticks out there. And the problem is that he keeps saying, I've said all I'm going to say, I have no comment, I have nothing more to say, which is how he staved off all the attacks on Jennifer Flowers earlier in the year. But in that case, everybody was embarrassed by it. They didn't think it was a legitimate issue. In the question of the military draft, it's different. People do think it's legitimate. He doesn't have his story straight, and he's not going to get away just saying, I have no more to say about it.
You know, I think Bob's right. I think the LA Times story, long story, was well reported, but it really wasn't that big a deal. But the larger issue is here that somehow he just doesn't seem like he's leveling with people on this issue.
Well, exactly. That was the problem with the American Legion speech as well. It's not that he wants to put this behind him and he can't. It's that his story keeps changing. Every new version has a different wrinkle in it, and it makes people uneasy. Anything that confirms people's suspicions that he's slick, that he's presenting too packaged an image is going to hurt him.
You agree, Mark?
Well, I agree, Al, but we're in new times politically. I would say that both Mona and Bob would have been right in the Cold War era. But Harrison Hickman, the Democratic strategist, had, I thought, a compelling point to make. He said that just as the New Deal sowed the seeds of its own downfall by creating a prosperous middle class more concerned with property taxes rates than with the minimum wages, that as a result of the end of the Cold War, presided over by George Bush and Ronald Reagan, that the commander-in-chief, the thumb on the button, the finger on the button, it recedes in importance to people. I don't think it's a national security issue against Bill Clinton. I do agree. His stories don't hang together. There are contradictions. There's corrections. But it's going to be a character issue rather than a national security issue.
Charlie, you're a decorated Army veteran, the father of a Marine. How does it strike you?
I think too much attention is being paid to it because, like Mark had said, we're talking about Vietnam. And even if we were talking about Korea, I really don't think people get excited about it. I don't really think that it's something like World War II where the whole free world liberty was at stake and people were volunteering. And while people can refer to him as a hero and a volunteer, I was volunteering to get off of the street because times were rough. And it's hard for me to think of anyone who had the resources to avoid the draft that didn't try to do it.
I didn't.
Vietnam, well, some people are brighter than others, but...
you're a lot older than all of us.
I never saw anyone volunteering to go to Vietnam.
He claimed that it was a fluke that he was never drafted. That's one of the things that's coming back to haunt him.
if that is wrong, then I think we should be talking about an indictment. But there were so many people that slipped through the cracks in the Vietnam War, so-called war, that.
But the point.
Let me just turn to Charlie on the other issue that we mentioned, and that is that there are a lot of black leaders, including the Honorable Congressman Charles Rangel, who think that Bill Clinton's trying to slip through the cracks as far as courting black votes and black leaders.
Well, we, like other Americans, when that bus stops, we know it's programmed, and we know that politicians like to talk about things that the people that are there want to hear. And none of these program stops that we see stopping in black towns or inner cities talk about the problems of unemployment and joblessness and hopelessness, the problems of drugs and drug addiction.
Do you think he's taking blacks for granted?
I think that this is a part of a strategy that they're going after the Reagan Democrats, but still, you know, it's one of those things that he has to let us all know that the Democratic Party, while we want him to broaden the base, that you can't ignore the base that he already has.
I think these are two very closely allied issues, because I think the problem is the Slick Willie thing. Charlie, it's nothing you indict the man for. There's no criminal question involved. But he could have said on the draft at the very beginning, I hated this war. I did everything possible to get out of it. Maybe I went too far, and nobody would worry about it. But it's all trying to fine-tune it. He is trying to fine-tune the thing with the black support, too. He wants the black support, but he doesn't want to be identified too closely.
Is it a plus or minus that he seems to be stiffing Jesse Jackson?
Well, it was a plus for him a few months ago when he seemed to be saying that he was distancing himself from the sort of sister soldier part of the black community. But he can't stiff the entire black community and get away with it as a Democratic candidate.
Final word on this subject, Mark?
Well, I think Bill Clinton, to be said in his defense, he reached out to guys who were with him in the primary, guys like Mike Espy and guys like John Lewis, black members of Congress from Atlanta and Mississippi. But I think there is some resonance to the criticism, Al, because the only time that Bill Clinton has said something to a group they didn't want to hear was he went to the Rainbow Coalition and took on the Sister Soldier thing. If he'd done that to the insurance industry, to the American Legion, to the auto manufacturers, to the Capital Gang, for that matter, he's welcome anytime.
Okay. Well, Charlie Rangel and the gang will be back with a generous George Bush and a beleaguered Geraldine Ferraro.
The Capital Gang is brought to you by Lexus Luxury Automobiles, the result of a relentless pursuit of perfection.
Inch of the Lexus coupe was designed to exhilarate you, even when you're not moving.
Every business morning, while the rest of the world is getting up, UPS is guaranteeing overnight delivery before 10:30 for far less than other companies charge. And every business morning, more people are waking up to that fact.
Good morning.
It started with the idea of giving truckers a better two-way radio system. Then with a war chest of $3,000, they decided to take on the largest company on earth. When the smoke cleared, MCI had changed telecommunications forever. Where in today's world do you find such aggressive, fast-growing companies? Actually, there's a list of them printed every day. NASDAQ, the stock market for the next 100 years.
Some people are still wondering if PIP does multicolor printing. The answer is yes, we do a little. Enough to fill this little football field every day. Color printing. One more reason PIP printing is the best business printer in the business.
Welcome back. President Bush paid his second visit to hurricane-devastated Florida, this time carrying a big money sack.
Today I'm announcing that we are committed to rebuilding Homestead Air Force Base. To show our commitment to South Florida.
He also brought help for Midwestern farmers.
Today I'm announcing a broadside of EAP initiatives to sell over 1 billion bushels or 30 million metric tons of U.S. wheat.
That reversed previous opposition to export subsidies. The president also switched sides by okaying Texas-built F-16 fighter planes for Taiwan.
I'm a Baptist, so I believe in deathbed conversions, but this is amazing.
Mark, is the president's pork barrel pandering politically effective?
Well, Al, I just can't stand these people who are morally censorious of what George Bush is doing. What else can George Bush do? George Bush has been part of an economic idea that hasn't worked. All right, for the past 4 years, it has been a terrible disaster in this country. And what the irony is that for the first time in the lifetime of most of the people of this panel, except Novak, we're seeing the Republicans trying to run a local campaign. In Michigan, it's on automobile fuel efficiency standards. In the Northwest Pacific, it's on the OWL. George Bush is running on F-16s in Fort Worth. He's running F-15s in Connecticut. Everywhere he goes, he's trying to do it. They don't want to run on the national issues, Al, because the national issues work against him, the economy, and the Republicans are not believable on him. So George Bush is trying to cherry-pick states, and believe me, it's not working.
Mona, he's right about the national-local difference, though, isn't it?
Well, he's right, and it's very difficult for a president of the United States to run as, the assemblyman who's going to bring back the pork for his district. His district is the United States of America, and he can't bring back something for absolutely every district, so I don't see how this really helps him. Plus, it undercuts his argument that he's not the big spender. The big spender is Bill Clinton, and that's the distinction between the parties. So I think it does hurt him. He does have an economic platform to run on if he'll only do it, namely NAFTA, the free trade agreement, low taxes. He's got to start doing more of that. He doesn't have a failed program.
Well, let me pick up on that, Bob, because sure, he is blasting Clinton for being a protectionist, and then he comes out for wheat export subsidies. Well, he's blasting Clinton for being a big spending liberal pork barrel guy, and then he comes out and promises everything everywhere.
After 10 years, the Bush-Reagan people finally decided that Taiwan can have planes after all, and it won't offend the Chinese. But it isn't a moral question. You're right. The problem with that kind of politics is it doesn't work. Didn't work for Gerald Ford, didn't work for Jimmy Carter. What he has to do is go national, and he has to have a national program. The mistake he made this week was not having this silly kind of pork barrel politics. It's been being a weak...
Guess what?
Being a weak president and letting the nerdy lawyers at the Justice Department talk the Attorney General into saying he didn't have the authority to, by executive order, index for inflation capital gains. That would have done much more for the economy than all of this pork barrel baloney.
Charlie, would Americans have rallied behind the president for indexing capital gains? Would you have seen a groundswell?
I would have rallied. I think the half a dozen that he knows probably would have. But I think that the president really is shattering the only anchor that he goes into the campaign with, and that is as a foreign policy leader. And as he shatters every trade agreement and subsidizing wheat, he alienates our trading partners. And whether you're for or against Taiwan or the People's Republic, we do have foreign policy agreements. And other countries depend on our leadership as to what they are going to do. So when you get involved in a nickel and dime campaign where you're just trying to save jobs for people, then I really think what he's doing is shattering the little bit he does have in credibility.
Let me say that the capital gains, Charlie, and as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, you should know that. It affects not 6 people, it affects all of America and really have a tremendous amount of jobs.
It's the wealth. If you believe in the trickle-down theory, then you're 100% right. But you know darn well you can get jobs without capital gains tax reduction.
You can't. You really can't.
You cannot.
No.
If we could just give the rich just a little bit more, they'd be nicer to the people who are at work. Let me just say, Al, in conclusion, Al, that the irony was that this week the press was ready to write pieces on Bill Clinton's own straddling, pandering, appealing, and all the rest of it. George Bush stepped on the story by doing it, out-pandering anybody.
That's not true, yes.
Mark, just in 10 seconds, you've been watching the bond markets and the dollar the last couple of weeks. Anything happened?
The bond market, and Bob was can attest to this, because frankly, I was talking to Lou Rukeyser about it, and it's really upsetting. I don't know what to do, Bob.
Next on Capital Gang, political mayhem in New York and California.
In our universe, there is always the unknown, the unpredictable. All we can do is prepare for it.
AT&T is now installing Fast Start. It can detect a cable cut instantly, so 800 calls can get back in minutes instead of hours.
We can send flowers for any occasion, anywhere, but only if our 800 service is up and running. Our 800 service isn't just a phone line, it's a lifeline.
I miss you.
AT&T has the most reliable 800 service, period.
AT&T. Call us.
You're looking at a small miracle. It's called an electronic twin-panel sunroof. It's a piece of automotive technology unlike any you've ever seen before. But then, so is this. Introducing the BMW 525i Touring.
The government is about to hand you a new law. It was intended to protect consumers from higher cable TV rates. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that. It's loaded with special interests that could increase your cable rates. In fact, if this law passes, your monthly bill for basic cable will go up, not down. Well, if that's consumer protection, how come you're getting soaked? Call now to send a message to your senators and congressmen. Tell them to vote no. Stop the bill that will raise your cable TV bill.
For months, you've heard what the candidates have to say. Now, let's hear from the people. A chance for voters like you to speak out about this election, voice concerns about this country's future, and talk about election issues important to all of us. Larry King takes his unique brand of talk to the heart of America to hear from you, the people. CNN and Knight Ridder present a Larry King Town Meeting, live from Wichita, September 13th, 9:30 Eastern on CNN.
Welcome back. Former Democratic vice presidential candidate Geraldine Ferraro is attempting a comeback against Republican Senator Alphonse D'Amato in New York. She has come under vicious attack, however, from another liberal Democratic woman, New York City Comptroller Elizabeth Holtzman, running against her in the September 15th primary.
Ferraro collected $340,000 in rent from pornographers with links to organized crime, even after she knew about it.
Just a year ago, a woman of courage faced lies, innuendo, and smears. Now another woman fighting for change is being smeared.
One difference between Anita Hill and Jerry Ferraro. Anita Hill came forward and told the truth.
Charlie, the Democrats cutting each other up so badly that D'Amato's going to sneak in?
I think there's going to be a backlash here. I think most of the people don't like the dirty politics that's taken place. And I think you're going to find a change in the campaign. I think that Ferraro really has benefited from these negative ads.
And you've endorsed another candidate, Bob Abrams.
Yes, Bob Abrams,
you
right.
Think Ferraro is...
Well, you know, when you muddy the water for the candidate that you're against, we all have to swim out there. When the voters get angry, they get angry with more than just the candidates.
Has it been dirty pool, Mona?
I find the whole thing refreshing. No, really, this town has convinced itself lately that the only people who engage in dirty politics are Republicans who run presidential campaigns. I mean, dirty politics has been with us as long as there's been a republic. And it shouldn't surprise us that Democrats do it, and women do it too. That's life.
Mark?
I think it's revealing and probably a sign of times and maybe even change, and good change, that women can attack women. And do it in a way that other women and other men can say is sleazeball or isn't sleazeball or is defensible. I do want to say one thing about Charlie Rangel. Charlie Rangel was one of the first people to endorse Attorney General Bob Abrams, yet when this attack came out, he went public and criticized it, and I think he did the right thing. And I think that once in a while you see an act like that with political courage, and I think it ought to be noted even on this show.
If I could get away from
this show.
Well, if I could get away, we know how close you are to Alphonse D'Amato, so you must have conflicting feelings about all this.
Let me tell you something. If I get away from all this moralizing all around here, the Republicans are just praying that this doesn't hurt Geraldine too much, because they want her to be nominated. They think she is the one candidate that D'Amato can beat. They don't really think he can beat Bob Abrams, because he is very.
I'll bet you they prefer Al Sharpton or Liz Holtzman.
But I think they think Holtzman is stronger, but they really think that he can beat Ferraro, and maybe he can, maybe he can't. But if you think this is dirty, wait till the general election campaign if it's Ferraro versus D'Amato.
I'm afraid he's right. I'm afraid he's right.
Reminds me of the time when we asked Henry Hyde if he was happy that that the Democrats were holding their convention in New York. He said Berkeley, California would have been his first choice. Across the continent, the 63-day budget standoff in California finally ended with no new taxes, heavy cuts in spending, and Democratic complaints.
That is going to cripple education in this state
in the 90s, and I don't think Californians, or the nation for that matter, really should be interested in a vision of this state which has us spending so low and so little on our kids.
The victor, Republican Governor Pete Wilson, didn't sound triumphant.
It's a difficult budget in that it reflects the very trying time that we are experiencing. The worst economic times since the Great Depression.
Mona, is California previewing the American future?
Well, Wilson may not have sounded triumphant, but that's because he can't gloat about a budget that actually does cut services and will hurt some people. But it was an absolutely necessary budget, and it teaches a very important lesson, which is that a Republican executive working with a Republican minority in the legislature can hold the line on new taxes. And that's what he did. He forced a compromise, which does cut spending in California. They had the highest welfare benefits in the country, and they had the highest spending on education. It was absurd. In the California system, wealthy people were being able to get their college education paid for by poorer people through the tax system. It was high time for reform.
Bob, is this the way of the future, slashing entitlements?
Yeah, I really believe it is, and I think, you know, most of the people were not hurt in California by most people who don't live off the state were not hurt by this 63 days of IOUs, and it was a big plus for Pete Wilson. Wilson was in terrible shape politically before this happened. I think he has probably restored himself, because one thing we haven't mentioned is that he stared a good friend of mine in the face, Willie Brown, the Speaker of the Assembly, and he won. Willie, for the first time in his life, was badly defeated, and Wilson was the big victor.
Mark, I think it was probably a victory for Pete Wilson, but you know something? You look at California. I remember 20 years ago, the California education system, the envy of the entire nation. I didn't envy it. No longer the case.
It was absolutely true, and with all due respect to Mona and Bob, I mean, that is a great American tradition of public education, and they were the beacon, they were the exemplar for the entire nation was California. It is no more. California was the Golden State. It is no more. Pete Wilson said, we've had the worst economic times since the Great Depression, and that is under George Herbert Walker Bush.
Charlie Rangel, California makes New York's problems look mild, doesn't it?
I know, but you know, it's a national problem. We had 2 million people that have moved into poverty as a result of some of the cutbacks we've had in the federal government. I do believe that if you follow the Reagan-Bush type of philosophy and you think that some people are going to get hurt, what bothers me, it's never the people that are looking for the capital gains tax cuts that get hurt. They get inconvenienced. But you're talking about kids' education, you're talking about Medicare on the federal level, you're talking about homelessness and joblessness, and it seems to me that if we could invest in getting people back to work, that in the long run we're saving money.
So that's the last word, Charlie Rangel. I want to thank you for being with us, and I wish you'd stay afterwards and maybe you can educate Bob Novak about capital gains. The gang will be back with the Outrage of the Week.
So you just got a cash advance, did you? Too bad you used an ordinary credit card. Because you could be carrying some very heavy interest charges. Why not carry the Discover card? Just pay your full monthly balance and a small transaction fee, and we'll forget the interest. Which means our money comes with no strings attached. It pays to Discover.
More reliable than most, this umbrella, those who carry the Travelers carry the choice of 50% of the Fortune 500 for property and casualty insurance that can help reduce claims and control costs, a full portfolio of pension fund investment options, and one of America's largest healthcare networks. Open in case you want strength and experience the Traveler's way. You're better off under the umbrella.
Listen to the trees. They're trying to tell us something about what our polluted air is doing to them and to us. Fortunately, there's an answer. Natural gas, the cleanest burning fossil fuel we have. It can help save the air and everything that lives in it. Listen to the trees, because air pollution is a problem hanging over all of us. Use natural gas and we'll all breathe easier.
This vehicle has a number of features that make it an extremely secure place to put money. So does this one. The Lexus LS 400. With the highest retained value in its class, it's like money in the bank.
And now for the outrage of the week. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, the agency in charge of aiding disaster, is itself a disaster, as evidenced by its slow and inept response to Hurricane Andrew. The head of FEMA is Wallace Stickney. His chief qualification, he was a crony of John Sununu's. The Bush administration isn't the first to use FEMA as a political dumping ground, but as George Bush could learn from his newly discovered political hero, Harry Truman, the buck stops with the president.
The people of Haiti are suffering. Lack of food and medicine take their toll. Is this caused by natural disasters, war, famine? It's none of the above. An embargo joined by the Bush administration tries to force Haiti to bring back an exiled leftist president whose brief tenure was marked by state-sponsored terror. Too bad that both U.S. presidential candidates ignore this outrage.
The District of Columbia's health commissioner announced this week that D.C. public school students will receive condoms even over the objection of their parents. Last week, the superintendent of schools had said parents could exempt their own children from the free condom program by writing a note. Not so, says the health commissioner. Only the health department has responsibility for the district's children. This is what happens when we retreat from family values.
Al, this week's good news. In Houston, which is his legal residence, the president is not a homeowner. He's registered to vote at the Houstonian Hotel, where Mr. Bush presumably votes by dropping off his absentee ballot with the concierge. Here's the good news. The Houstonian Hotel, which has been in Chapter 11 bankruptcy under the Bush administration, looks like it will soon be sold. The boom is on.
Jeez, and they did it without a capital gains. You know, I was in Wyoming for a week, Bob, and, you know, there was a lot of talk about you out there. There really was.
I tell you,
a couple of moose, as a matter of fact, said that you know they really admire you so much because you represent that era before the white man spoiled the land.
You know, the thing with you and our good friend Charlie Rangel that you'll never understand is you cannot make jobs if there's no capital. You need capital for jobs,
Mark,
and that's maybe something they don't understand at the White House either.
I hope he'll teach you that. This is Al Hunt saying good night for the Capital Gang.
For a transcript, send $5 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203, or call 1-303-831-9000.
I'm John DeDakis at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Coming up next on Newsnight, auto parts workers in Ohio say yes to a new deal with General Motors, ending a strike that brought GM car production at several plants to a standstill. And this Labor Day weekend in South Florida, people are not taking time off. The work of rebuilding the hurricane-damaged communities goes on.
We shouldn't be afraid of these children. What we should be afraid of in society is not helping these children.
They are society's littlest victims of poverty and drug abuse. A look at the plight of border babies. And in the ring, women are getting to the punch. Could boxing be the next workout craze? It's all coming up, plus the highlights from the U.S. Open in New York, next on Newsnight, right after this.
At Crescent, our people make the difference. Friendly professionals ready to help you find the right car, truck, or van at the right price and provide reliable, convenient service after the sale. Crescent Chevrolet Geo, downtown for 60 years.
Friendly Crescent Chevrolet.
25 years old, first job, finally making some real money. Got a million ideas, gonna be the best. Maybe even have my own company someday. Dad keeps harping. Start investing for retirement now. Retirement, that's a million years away, isn't it?
Smart people invest for retirement early, and they choose a smart thing. First Star, where the people are Main Street friendly, and the advice is Wall Street smart.
Come on. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
No matter how much we talk about it,
or fight about it.
There's no denying the differences between men
and women.
Now the Discovery Channel presents a startling new series that searches the brain for the origins of why we think, behave, and love so differently.
Brain Sex, Tuesdays at 9 and Saturdays at 5 on the Discovery Channel and TCI Cablevision.
With so much happening every day, sometimes we all wish we had a little more free time. But even if you only watch a couple events per month, premium channels are time and money well spent.
Right now, your $5 installation fee goes to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. That's not all. Your first month of any one premium service is on us. That's right, free. Plus, receive up to $15 in valuable coupons for our newest services.
We know how valuable your free time is, which is why premium channels are today's best value.